everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, I am fantastic for exactly the reason you're probably thinking I'm fantastic. I just paid a visit to QBForce.com for the first time in probably 10 years. That, of course, is the Forcier family website about their three quarterback playing sons. Tate Forcier, of course, being the best known of them, former Michigan quarterback. And that came up as a result of multiple McCaffreys being in the portal and another football quarterback family, which brought back fine memories. The Forciers, which brought us to QBForce.com, and it is the height of early 2010s web design, and really worth a trip from anywhere. Wherever your computer is, it is worth a trip to QBForce.com. Tony, how are you?
I'm good. I understand Tate Forcier has his own clothing line.
Well, there's some gray area there. Because he did have his own apparel line. However, the most recent update on Tate Forcier was that he had signed with the Hamilton Tiger Cats, which is a not particularly good Canadian football team. And he also had his own clothing line, which was findable at gteamapparel.com, but that website no longer goes anywhere. So he may have transferred out of the clothing business as well.
So is it Canadian clothing apparel, which would just be denim shirts and like flannel?
Denim shirts and denim pants. Yes. The Canadian tuxedo, the QB tuxedo. Yes. Canadian QB tuxedo, the Hamilton Ticats QB tuxedo. Yeah. It's a good look. It's a good look on anyone.
Of course. Yes, most definitely. So thank you all for joining the show. Today's episode is basically going to be about the early enrollees that came in this past weekend, 15 of them who are now halfway through their quarantines or so. Not halfway, maybe, 3/7 of the way, if you will, of their 1 week.
This is really important to get the fraction exactly right. So if you want to calculate the hours, we can figure that out.
But they will be quarantining until then. February 1st is, I guess, when they will start to get entered into the winter workouts. That's when those things will begin. So 9 guys on offense, 5 guys on defense, and 1 Australian punter, which I don't know if that constitutes offense or defense. I think it's a little bit of both. So let's say 9.5 on offense and 5.5 on defense is what the Ohio State Buckeyes have brought in. And we can just run through them real quick, and then I'm going to have some we'll talk about them, Tom. I've got some over-unders for you. We're going to do some predictions against your will, which is my favorite. So here's what we got. Quarterback Kyle McCord. Running backs TreVeyon Henderson and Evan Pryor. Receivers Marvin Harrison Jr., Emeka Egbuka, and Jaden Ballard. Tight end Sam Hart. Offensive lineman Ben Christman and Zen Michalski. Defensive end Jack Sawyer. Defensive tackle Tyleek Williams. Linebacker Reid Carrico. Defensive back Denzel Burke. Safety Jansen Dunn. And punter Jesse Mirko. And I say defensive back Denzel Burke because to me, I think he could probably end up anywhere in this, any of the cornerback spots, slot corner, slot safety, somewhere in there. Probably one of those 3 cornerback positions, though, with the outside and the inside. Tom, real quick not even real quick on Burke. He's, I think, the lowest rated of the corners that Ohio State signed, but he's the only one in this spring. And so when you're entering into class with J.K. Johnson and Jordan Hancock, 2 guys who some places could start as true freshmen, I'm guessing. You come in and now you've got a couple month advantage, 6-month advantage on those guys. You get to go through winter workouts with Mick. You get to go through spring camp. I think this is a tremendous decision for Burke, maybe over anybody else, because of what Ohio State didn't have this past season, what they will have this season, but not until the summer. And so this is a great opportunity for him to, if he needs to catch up.
Well, it puts him kind of on not that dissimilar footing from someone like Cam Martinez, who came in last summer and had that weird disjointed lead up to the season and probably didn't get as many reps as he likely would have during a normal year, and definitely didn't get the game reps that he had in a normal year. This is, for a lot of those freshmen that weren't early enrollees last year, this is basically the first real hardcore workouts and practices they're really going to be doing and in terms of like on-field reps in a lot of cases. So it puts Burke a little bit more it's not as big a gap as it would be as normal, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, from last year's true freshman non-early enrollees to this year's freshman early enrollees. It does give him a leg up on some of the guys who are not coming in until the summer. I mean, corner's a difficult place to get on the field as a true freshman, regardless. It seems like it should be basically almost impossible if you're not early enrolling. That's really going to put those guys a little bit behind the 8 ball for this year. And there's 4 defensive backs among the 6 players who are not early enrolling. Like I'm sure if the Ohio State coaching staff had their choice, they would have had a couple more defensive backs and maybe take a couple guys off from other positions where you're less likely to contribute as a true freshman. But man, that it is going to be very tough for those guys who are coming in this summer to break into that rotation at any point this year without having been here this spring. That's really going to kind of put them behind the 8 ball.
Yeah, I'm guessing Combs and Day and those guys would have really, really liked to have Jalen Johnson and Jordan Hancock in this winter just to try to build up the entire talent pool of that secondary and let the cream rise to the top through all of the competing and things like that. So, Tom, what we're going to do, I'm going to run through some of these, give you some prop bets, some over-unders, like I said, and some of these numbers may seem random, but there are no such things as random numbers when I propose over-unders to you. A couple of them are random, though. So just keep that in mind. But so let's go right away, leaving Jesse Merkel out of this because that's the cheap, easy answer. Who among the early enrollees gets the first start?
I think there's one answer that jumps out to me as more likely than anyone else, and I think that's TreVeyon Henderson, because I think there's a possibility he wins that starting job by the end of the year. Everyone else, it probably requires injuries or something like that for them to get a start. You could have like a Jack Sawyer work his way into the rotation. You could have, if one of the wide receivers gets dinged up, you could have like a Emeka Egbuka potentially getting a start sometime later in the year, someone like that. But I think you're most likely to see it out of TreVeyon Henderson, just because I don't expect him to be a day one starter. But I think it's possible he's at the very least in that regular running back rotation towards the end of the year, and it's possible he gets a start.
Yeah, I think we both have said in the past that neither of us will be shocked if he's starting in November. TreVeyon Henderson. Real quick, would you take Henderson or the field?
I think I would probably take Henderson because I think there's a lot of guys on here. Like if you're a true freshman offensive lineman, it's almost impossible for you to start. Yeah. So, I mean, there's certain guys you can probably just kind of cross off this list, and that's not a slight on them. That's just, it's going to be very hard to win that job. The only thing that kind of gives me pause is like Kyle McCord, Emeka Egbuka, and like Jack Sawyer are maybe one of them gets in there. I think you might. I think there's a decent argument to be made that the most likely scenario is no one starts, followed by TreVeyon Henderson starts, followed by the field. I think that's a decent possibility. I think there's a decent possibility none of these guys start, and it's probably greater than 50-50 that none of these guys start. I mean, you're asking a lot to have a true freshman start. Henderson and the talent level in this class is high enough that it's not out of the realm of possibility for a couple of these guys. But I think in terms of a reasonable expectation, it would be reasonable. TreVeyon Henderson's career is not a disappointment if he does not start this year. And that's true of everyone else as well.
Well, and really it just says who gets the first start. It didn't say who gets it this year.
That's
so
true.
We could stretch to their senior year before any of these guys gets to start. I mean, let's be honest.
That would be a disappointing outcome for this recruiting class. Yes.
But you did mention Kyle McCord, which I think is a sneaky bet because if he wins a backup job and somebody gets hurt, boom, he's in there. And we've seen in the past where that happens. It hasn't happened in a while, but it has happened in the past, mainly with Braxton Miller being the quarterback, and then of course JT Barrett getting hurt in 2014. Zach Harrison got a start his freshman year, but that required injuries. However, the defensive ends that will be returning this season, be it Tyler Friday, Tyreek Smith, both have histories of injuries. So now you're asking Jack Sawyer to maybe jump ahead of, say, Javonte Jean-Baptiste or Tyler Friday or Zach Harrison. There's ways, because there are just so many injuries in the defensive end group in 2019 to where like 5 different guys got to start that year. And with many of those guys back who have dealt with injuries, maybe there's a way that Jack Sawyer gets the first one. I was thinking maybe because nose tackle is a question mark with Antoine Jackson, Jerron Cage, maybe Tyleik Williams comes in and he's just a different type of guy. But to expect that from a freshman, it's a little bit like the offensive lineman where, yeah, he may be good, but is he strong enough at the point of attack? Is he smart enough? Can he do this? Can he do that? And so that's asking a lot. But yeah, I think the easy answer is Henderson, which is why I have on my notes Henderson versus the field, because at this point, he is the easiest answer. He is the best answer, and it would take something a little unusual. Oh, Tom, what about here's Sam Hart starts in a 2 tight end in a 12 personnel. He has to jump a couple of guys in the depth chart, but maybe something like that.
I think there's a couple things that would keep me from thinking that happens. One is how deep the wide receiver personnel is. It seems like they have so much more depth at wide receiver than they do at tight end that you're almost certainly not, you're going to see a lot more 1 tight end personnel groupings than 2 this year. And it also requires him to jump Joe Royer, jump Kate Stover. So yeah, that seems like I think there's a couple of reasons why I don't think that's super likely. I mean, it's possible. There's a few guys on here that I think are at least possibilities. There are a few position groups where it's like offensive line is going to be very, very hard, both because of what's required of you and also because of the depth there. I think that's probably also true at linebacker. I think that's going to be very hard for like Reid Carrico to get on the field as a starter. Just you've got so much good, proven veteran depth there that I think it's going to be hard to jump any of those guys. But yeah, I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility for Sam Hart. That just doesn't seem super, super likely to me.
Evan Pryor in a 2-back set.
Maybe, and I know that's your next. We actually, in a shocking twist, I got an email from you this morning with a show rundown. I was like, "What is this madness? We're not just doing this off the cuff. What?
Nope. It's the off season, man.
What is this?" Yeah. So I know we're talking about him next. I think that's a situation where, yeah, maybe, but there's a lot of guys you got to jump over there, and I don't know if what are the odds they have 2 true freshmen back there? I think it's much more likely you get TreVeyon Henderson in some kind of a starting role than, 2 true freshmen back there as starters. Like that seems like that would really, unless there is just an absolute biblical plague of injuries in that running back room. I don't know if I see that happening.
All right. So then let's go to Evan Pryor. I have an over-under here for you, Tom. 332.5 yards rushing this season for Evan Pryor. And that number is the average yards rushing for Ohio State's true freshman running backs since 2012. And it's bolstered a little bit by the 1,403 yards from J.K. Dobbins. But that's guys like Ezekiel Elliott and his like 260 or 300 yards, and Demario McCall's 270 yards. Guys that didn't really get to play a lot, but still put up a decent amount of yards. So where are you going? I have a pretty good idea where I'm going on this Evan Pryor, 332.5 yards, but where are you over or under that?
I like the Ezekiel Elliott and Demario McCall having virtually the same number of true freshman rushing yards. 2 guys whose Buckeye careers went exactly the same after their freshman year.
Indeed.
Ezekiel Elliott, I did look this up just since we're doing show prep all of a sudden. I don't even know who you are anymore. Ezekiel Elliott, 30 carries, 262 yards. 8.7 yards per carry. That seems pretty good. 2 touchdowns, but 262 yards for Ezekiel Elliott as a freshman. This seems very high to me. 332 for Pryor, because you got to remember, yeah, you've got Henderson, you've got Master Teague, you've got Mayan Williams, you've got Marcus Crowley, you've potentially got Steel Chambers. There's so many other guys in there that it seems like even if he's like the 4th back in that pecking order, maybe you have someone who switches positions, maybe you have someone who transfers, maybe you have someone who gets hurt, whatever it is. Even if he's the 3rd or 4th back in that pecking order, I think you probably have to be the 3rd back to get close to that number. And I think the odds are probably greater that he ends up under that number than over.
If you putting TreVeyon Henderson over that though?
I would put TreVeyon Henderson over that. I would put TreVeyon Henderson and Marcus Crowley and Master Teague over that number. And, Pryor, I think if you're the fourth back, Mayan Williams is probably over that number. Again, this is a little hard to project because it's like, okay, are all of these guys actually going to be healthy and on the roster to start the season? If someone transfers, if someone gets hurt, then that kind of changes the calculus a little bit. But right now, based on what we know right now, I think odds are you're not going to have 5 backs over 332 yards.
So let me take J.K. Dobbins out of that. That brings it down to 199 yards. So if I go 199.5, Tom, for Evan Pryor, true freshman, I think I'm going to go over that.
Yeah, that's a pretty good number.
Because there's going to be a 40-yard run in there somewhere, right?
Yeah, and you got to remember they're presumably, and again, since we're making all of these assumptions,
yes.
I'm assuming they're playing a full non-conference schedule this year, which means you've got a couple MAC teams on the early schedule, and I think you're that's a lot closer. I think that's a lot closer. I think I would maybe go over there, and I think I'm going over because I think something does happen where there are not 4 guys ahead of him. Like, what is the fifth back average finish with during a typical year at Ohio State? Like the fifth running back feels like the answer is about 75 yards. So I assume someone probably is not there for one reason or another by the time the fall rolls around. So yeah, I guess I'll go over that, but I'm a lot less confident in that one way or the other than I am in the under on the bigger number.
Just looking at 2019, the fifth back, Steel Chambers 135. In 2018, Master Teague at 106, Paris Campbell 132 in 2017, 2016, 78. So, yeah, but those are also years where you had to find leaders in terms of who's getting the ball, and maybe this year you don't. So there's more trickle down there where they're just trying different guys, and other guys are getting opportunities. I think 332 yards is too high. I'm going under that for sure. But I just think, can he rush for 200 yards if he's averaging, 7.5 yards a carry, I think is, because there's going to be a long one in there. That's 27 carries. Is he going to get 27 carries and average what Marcus Crowley averaged 8 or 9 yards a carry as a true freshman? So, can he get 27 carries over 2 carries a game is what we're looking for. And he's not going to carry the ball in every game. It's, does he get 7 against, the 7 and 6 in like the first couple of games, and then over the course against Rutgers, is there 4 at the end of that game? Tom, am going over 199.5, and I don't think he's going to need a lot of carries to do it.
Yeah, you're asking a lot, because I think you got to remember, here's their non-conference schedule this year. And I did just have to look this up because it feels a little aggressive to be thinking this far ahead and going, yeah, this is definitely not going to change. Nothing is going to change 9 months out. Oregon, that's probably not a game where you are getting a bunch of carries for young guys. Tulsa, which is a better, this is not 2 lousy MAC teams. This is not, you don't have Bowling Green on the schedule this year.
And you do have a new starting quarterback for the Buckeyes.
You have a new starting quarterback for the Buckeyes. That's a game where Ohio State could win that game 48-17, and that's a really decisive win. But you don't have, you're not playing your 4th running back for the entire 4th quarter of a game that you're winning by, whatever that is, 30 points or whatever it is. And then Akron is the fourth game of the season. That's the one where you're probably, if Evan Pryor is getting 8 carries in a game, it's going to be against Akron, because Akron is so bad. Akron is so extremely bad. Ohio State, that's one where Ohio State should win by 60 points. So you probably are having the second half where you've got several of the, multiple of the running backs getting 8-10 carries. So, but outside of that, there's not that many games that I feel like are absolute definite blowouts on the schedule this year. Rutgers is better. They get Purdue at home. Purdue's not great. They get Maryland at home. Maryland's not great. But there's not multiple games that it's like, oh yeah, Ohio State's going to be laying 60 points in this game. So I think that's going to hold down some of the freshman production some. And boy, Just in case you hadn't been mad at the Big Ten recently, Ohio State fans, same last two games as they had in 2019, Penn State at home and then at Michigan and then the Big Ten championship game. So yeah, I'm sure that won't come back to bite Ohio State just like it did 2 years ago. Should be fine. Exactly the kind of thing that the SEC does to its
yes
flagship teams. Yeah.
So the Big Ten's days of trying to screw over Ohio State are certainly not done. So we're getting back to normal. Not that we ever left it in that regard. I will go back to 2019. Steel Chambers, 19 carries for 135 yards in 4 games. Marcus Crowley, 25 carries, 237 yards. I think I understand why you're going under, and I think maybe a lot of people will. But Tom, I believe in the Buckeyes.
I like the fact that you can be very bold and very positive for something that we never end up going back and listening to any of these and checking on these. Like, we need a listener to just like send us a Google Doc of all of these things so we can revisit them at some point later. Our over-under shows for last year probably would not turn out great, but I think that was some stuff that was a little bit out of our control. But
we did revise it.
That's true. And any unders we bet, I'm feeling pretty good about. So
yes. All right. So let's go to the next one, Tom. Over/under of 78.4 yards rushing per game for TreVeyon Henderson, and 78.4. Do you know where I got that, Tom?
I don't know where you got that.
That's what Bijan Robinson averaged in 2020. And that's a guy Ohio State missed out on. They land TreVeyon Henderson, who was one of the top guys, just like Robinson was the year before. And the way Robinson got it, though, like his first 5 or 6 games, he had nothing basically. And then just Tom Herman finally figured, maybe let's give this guy the ball, like the best recruit we've signed since Vince Young. Let's see what he can do. And so then he just started crushing people and almost went for just under 1,000. He was shy of 1,000 yards. Now this 78.4 yards over 14 games would put Henderson over 1,000 yards. I believe you've been on the cusp of 1,000-yard dumb for Henderson. So Tom, over under 78.4 yards rushing per game for TreVeyon Henderson, a true freshman, Tom, who did not play high school football as a senior.
I think I'm going to go under on this one. It's just a true freshman who didn't play high school football as a senior and is part of a pretty talented. I mean, the Ohio State running back room is a heck of a lot deeper and more talented than the Texas running back room, which is, I think, the biggest thing that keeps me from taking this one. I think it's possible Henderson wins the starting job. I think it's possible Henderson has multiple Big Ten games with more than 78 yards per rush, but I don't know how early that happens in the season. And I don't know how many 15, 20 carry games he's getting. Are they trying to keep multiple guys happy? Are they trying to keep guys fresh? I mean, if Henderson is a freshman, you always worry about freshmen wearing down in their first college season, kind of hitting the wall. This is a schedule where there's a whole lot of not much between, they open with Minnesota and Oregon, then it's Tulsa, Akron, Nebraska, Purdue, Rutgers, Michigan State, Indiana, Maryland.
Ugh.
There's a whole lot of not much between September 11th and November 20th. So I think they're going to probably try and keep him, don't wear him down, keep him fresh, keep him, with 10 carries a game rather than 15, 20 carries a game, even if he is kind of the starter, 10, 12 carries a game, because they have other guys. They don't need to just lean on him like Texas did with Bijan Robinson, where they're giving him 20, 25 carries towards the end of the season. You have Master Teague, you have Marcus Crowley, you have Mayan Williams, you have Evan Pryor, you have Steel Chambers. Like, you've got other guys who have, are good, solid running backs who are way better than what Texas has outside of Bijan Robinson right now. So I think I'm going to go under, and I think the reason is because I don't think he's going to get, even if he's averaging 10 yards a carry, he's got to average 7.8 yards per carry, and that's a lot to ask for a true freshman.
Yeah, and I think I've already said that I don't see necessarily anybody getting 1,000 yards for the Buckeyes this year, so that would have to put Henderson under that mark for me. What if, say he's starting by October 1st? I mean, I'm going over.
Starting by October 1st. Yeah, I mean, If he started,
are there 4 games in September? Or
there are four.
5?
There are 4 games in September.
Okay.
Minnesota, Oregon, Tulsa, Akron are the games in September. You're starting in October. They're at Nebraska, home for Purdue,
That's
at
1,000
Rutgers.
yards, 2,000 yards.
Yeah, if I'll tell you what, if he puts up 1,000 yards against Nebraska, I give him a pretty good chance of averaging 78 yards per carry or per game in this during the season. I mean, you've got your whole month of October is just kind of like, oh, well, they're going to be 20-point favorites again at Nebraska, home for Purdue, at Rutgers, home for Michigan State, at Indiana, home for Maryland. I mean, that's 6 games in a row that are, if they wanted to do it, like if they feel like he's ready to start, you can play him there because it's like if he gets the freshman fumbleitis like Eddie George did, like who cares? Like he can fumble the ball twice and they'll still beat Rutgers. They'll still beat, you'll still beat Nebraska. You'll still beat Purdue. You'll still beat Michigan State. Like these are teams that they're going to be favored by 20-something points. And if you cough it up a couple times, like, okay, well, then you're going to lose your starting job. But yeah, I still don't. I don't know what it would take for him to be the starter at that point. Is it just he is so head and shoulders above everyone else? Because this is the baseline in that Ohio State running back room is high enough that I don't know if he's going to be head and shoulders over everyone else without having played last year, true freshman. I mean, it's possible, but it wasn't like J.K. Dobbins came in and just like beat out Mike Weber. Mike Weber tore his hamstring. Like, if you got a couple guys hurt, like, yeah, okay, then we're having that conversation. If you guys have a guy transfer or a guy transfer, switch positions, like, okay, then we're maybe having that conversation a little bit more. But, with the running back room as presently comprised, I think I'm going to say after October 1st, even though I did read the article you wrote about all the freshmen and with all those embedded highlights and watch the TreVeyon Henderson highlights and went, man. I don't know exactly how good the competition is, but he did not make the competition look very good.
And he's running on some really terrible looking fields, like little league baseball diamond type of little bit of wheat grass here and there too. Watch him on turf and see what happens. Now this next one came from Twitter from at OSU Evan. Wanted to know how many snaps into the Minnesota game until TreVeyon Henderson enters a lineup. I set the over-under on 11.5, which tells you where I think it's about going to happen. And I think that could be series number 3 if the first 2 series go well, or it could be midway through series 2, at which point he could even be the third running back coming into the game, but still getting in that early because they just want to get him involved. I would probably, I don't know where I'm going to go on this one. If it's, I guess maybe over just because he's a true freshman and it's the first game and maybe you let things calm down a little bit. But where are you going? 11.5 offensive snaps into the game.
I'm going to go over. I think odds are he plays before halftime. If he's healthy, I think he plays before halftime in that game. Again, it's a true freshman. Again, they have more proven veteran depth there. I think they're going to want to give Master Teague some carries. I think they're going to want to give Marcus Crowley some carries. I think you're going to want to give Mayan Williams some carries. If a true freshman is coming in, like no one's going to be, a true freshman is not going to be salty if it takes until 10 minutes left in the second quarter to play, to start playing in his freshman, first game as a freshman, especially on the road in a Big Ten game. I think it's almost more of an interesting question. Which scenario makes it more likely that you see him under this? Is it the first play they go 78 yards for a touchdown and they're up 14-0 with 7 minutes left in the first quarter, and then it's like third drive, okay, let's put the freshman in because we're really rolling right now? Or is it they kind of bog down, they have a couple 3-and-outs, and then okay, let's put the electric freshman in and see what happens? Which one of those scenarios makes it more likely that it's under to you?
I think the second one, because if it's you score really quickly on the first drive or two, they're going to want to keep the starting running back in at that point to get him some reps. So I would think, if things aren't going well, change some things up and see what happens. And I like that second scenario better. A good question, Tom. Good question. Next, touchdown passes for Kyle McCord this season. And Tom, just so you know, I went through since 2012, eliminating the 2013, the 2014, and 2015 season. Backup quarterbacks at Ohio State, the backup quarterback at Ohio State, has thrown for 3.14 touchdowns per season. And the reason I eliminated 13, 14, and 15 is because backups played extensively in those seasons. So just the years where there were no, big injuries or anything like that. And by the way, the outlier in all of that is Chris Chuganov's 6 touchdown passes from 2019, I believe. So the over-under for Kyle McCord this year, 3.5 touchdown passes, knowing that he may not be the backup, or he very well could be, or you know what, Tom, maybe he's the starter. All of those things factor into your decision on where to go. Over under 3.5 touchdowns passes. Don't do no sneaky running the ball in on this, and no pick sixes don't count either. Just touchdown passes to Ohio State receivers, tight ends, running backs, or tackle eligibles.
How many pick sixes do you think he's going to throw? Now who's the hater?
1.5 over under.
Yeah, this to me, I think I'm going to go over here because I think you're going to have, there's a decent possibility he's the second quarterback behind, at least the second quarterback. I think that there's if he is, you're probably, the schedule is soft enough. He's probably getting reps during a bunch of those. I mean, everything, like I said, anything after September 11th and before about November 20th is like, yeah, you could see a quarter Kyle McCord or whoever the backup is. And when they're playing, if you're playing your backups, you're going to see them want to run the offense. Because if this is whoever the backup is going to be someone who literally has not thrown a college pass as of this exact moment that we are talking right now. So it's going to be completely understandable that you're going to get these guys game reps. I think whoever that second quarterback is going to be over that number by some number. I mean, there's a possibility you get a couple touchdowns against Akron just in that one game, let alone, you get one against Tulsa, you get one against Rutgers, whatever it is. I would go over this. I think that's more of a statement of, I believe in Kyle McCord enough that I think that whoever that second, first string and second string are both going to go over that number. And I believe in Kyle McCord enough that I think he's probably going to go over that one way or the other.
Yeah, I'm going over as well. Dwayne Haskins went over in 2017. He had 4. Joe Burrow only had 2 in 2016, which tells you Dwayne Haskins clearly better than Joe Burrow in all facets, as we know. But also, if, say, it's fairly cut and dry between, C.J. Stroud or Jack Miller as a starter and Kyle McCord is the number 2. But what if it isn't? Like, what if there is still, like, Ryan Day wants to see Kyle McCord in the game, and so he's going to play more. Now, I don't know how much against Oregon he would necessarily play, but maybe he wants to see what this kid looks like in with more game reps, and so that leads to the possibility of more. So yeah, I'm going over on that. Tom, if I go 5.5, where are you going?
Probably under, because I think there's just, I think whoever that backup is probably in that 5-6 range, but I'm not so 100% confident in the fact that that's absolutely going to be McCord that I would say definitely he's over.
All right, Tom, let's move to the defensive side of the ball, where Ohio State looks to play defense next year because they did not obviously play defense this past season, as we all know. And of course, that's a joke because they did, so please calm down.
Just not well.
That was Tom saying that. So we're going to take a big picture look. Reid Carrico, linebacker, over under on the number of times that he is first team All Big Ten in his career. Now, I don't see him starting this year. I pretty much see him starting in 2022 when Ohio State loses a bunch of linebackers again from all of these guys that are going to be seniors in 2021. They lose those guys. You might have 3 jobs wide open again. And so you see him jump in, become a starter as a probably a sophomore at that point. I don't know that he'll redshirt. I think they're going to like him on special teams this year. So the over-under number of times he's All Big Ten, first team in his career. Could be the coaches or could be the stupid media. Either one. 1.5. Where are you going?
I'm going to go under because I think Pete Werner. How many times was Pete Werner first team All Big Ten?
I believe once.
Once. Yeah. I mean, as a linebacker, Pete Werner's career is something to aspire to. That is a pretty darn good career. So you can have a pretty darn good career and be special teams as a freshman. Your first year as a starter, you're a third team. Something like that. You could be a third team All Big Ten linebacker as a first year starter. It's like, that's a good year. Okay, now your third year, maybe your first team, then your second team, your first team, something like that. Is he someone who then leaves for the NFL? Maybe. I mean, you get to the point where if you are a first team All Big Ten linebacker, you're starting to have that NFL conversation. So unless you do it as a sophomore, as a first year starter, it's there are a whole lot of ways you could have a very good career and not be first team All Big Ten twice.
Yeah, it's almost like if you are first team All Big Ten as sophomore and then you're expected to be as a junior, then you won't have a senior season, so you're leaving early. And so if it is going to be twice, does it happen right away or does he stick around? But again, you don't have to be All Big Ten to leave early. We know that. I just, when I watch him, he's always around the ball. It would require some hype and it would require production because Ohio State really hasn't had a super tackler for a while. I think what Joshua Perry had like 140 in 2013 or 2014 rather, something like that. And been pretty spread out evenly over the years since then. Malik Harrison would have like 100, or sometimes I think they've had 80 be enough, and that's 80 would lead the team, and that's not enough to really create the when people are voting on this stuff. The first thing you do if you don't know names, you go look at the stats, and you can run down the stats of the tackles, and you get a long way before you see anybody from Ohio State because they've got 13 guys spread out over all of these their tackles, and so you kind of need a guy that is just this massive tackle hoarder, not necessarily a pile jumper. Pile jumpers help, and lenient statisticians as well. But Tom, I'm gonna go over because it may not be as a sophomore and a junior, maybe as a junior and a senior, maybe as a redshirt sophomore and a redshirt senior. You don't know, and so there are a number of options. I'm gonna go that he is a 2-time All Big Ten guy at least. But I do think he's probably starting next year. And next year, when I say 2022, because this year is already 2021 for me.
I'm just going to use those interchangeably forever, and that's just, I'm sorry. When I say last year, I mean, yeah, last year and this year, like, yeah, we're just going to confuse you. Just reach the point of acceptance on that. It's okay. I think one thing that's going to hurt you in terms of being a Mike backer is just the proliferation of spread offenses. You're not getting 29 tackles a game like Chris Spielman used to rack up those huge numbers because they're not, teams aren't just running ISO 30 times a game and powering the fullback up the middle. Like when you think about big tackle games that Tough Borland had, it was generally like Wisconsin, the Army game in 2017, he had 10 tackles, something like that, 12 tackles. But most teams are not running that way. So you're not piling up those like crazy stats like you used to. So in addition to the depth that Ohio State has at linebacker, and the fact that they're going to spread those reps out probably more than a lot of teams do because they have such good depth and you want to get those guys on the field. You're not playing quite as many snaps as other teams do, and you're not piling up those stats like you used to. So yeah, I think it's entirely possible he goes his whole career without having a 100 tackle season. Mm-hmm. And again, you can have a very good career without having a 100 tackle season. It feels like without looking, it feels like Northwestern linebackers end up with 1 million tackles. That doesn't necessarily mean they're better than like a Pete Werner, but you end up with prettier tackle numbers. And as you said, the idiot media will look at that and go, aha, Patty Fisher it is.
I was going to say, I have voted for Patty Fisher 6 years running. If he's on the list, I'm putting him there because he's at the top of the stat sheet. So Tom, let's move roll back to offense here. I like this question, frankly, because there's a number of different ways you can go. Who ends up with more career receptions between the three receivers entering this year, enrolling right now? Marvin Harrison, Emeka Egbuka, or Jaden Ballard? And Tom, before you give me your answer, I want to explain some things to you. Like Emeka Egbuka, he's the answer. That's the one. Of course, it's going to be him, but he may not get a lot of catches in 2021, and he may be around for only 3 seasons. So he's going to do the bulk of his work in just 2 years. Whereas Marvin Harrison, Jaden Ballard could be 4-year guys, and so they're spreading that work out over 4 years. So then you got to take those two. Marvin Harrison being an X, Jaden Ballard being a Z probably. The Z gets a lot more catches at Ohio State than the X, but Jaden Ballard will also be splitting time with perhaps Emeka Egbuka, or does Jackson Smith and Jigba move outside, or is Julian Fleming there? So Tom, Marvin Harrison?
I don't know. Yeah, it's just like I saw this on the list and I was like, you could look at this any of 6 different ways. And I think you could make an argument for any of these 3 guys in some way. If one of them is definitely going to be a starter, I think Egbuka is the most likely to be the H, right? I mean,
he could be H, he could be Z, he could be X.
Yeah, I mean, of the 3 guys, I think Egbuka is the guy who is the most natural fit at H.
Yeah.
If you're the H, I feel like you end up getting more receptions. So I think I'll go with Egbuka because I think there's a pretty decent chance he ends up with by far the most in any individual season. And then it's like, okay, we're trying to project who's going to be here 3 years versus 4 years and who's, the depth charts. Like, if you tell me that one guy is going to have 60 receptions in a year, I'm going to take that guy in terms of career receptions just because it's like, you got to either play for a long time, play consistently, or you're just going to have to have like one season that's almost that good. And I think it's harder to have that kind of season on the outside. So I'm going to go with Egbuka just because of the H and the role that it typically plays in the Ohio State offense.
Yeah, and if he gets, say, 50 receptions as a sophomore, you would expect similar as a junior. So now you're looking at maybe he's got 120 receptions in his 3 years, and you look at the other guys. Well, that's only 30 receptions a year over 4 years, but they're not going to get any as freshmen. So now can either of those guys average more than 40 over their 3 years? And you're like, I don't know. I like what you're thinking. But Tom, we'll see. Somebody needs to bring this back to us in 4 years to see if you're right or wrong, because I am not providing an answer.
I think there's a decent possibility that one of those guys also goes pro after 3 years.
Yeah.
Or that's the thing. It's like you're trying to project, like, what's the wide receiver class going to look like in 3 years? Like, I don't know. What do you want out of me, people? What do you want out of me? That's the real question here. And I think you have seen guys who are that kind of Jaden Ballard mode. I mean, the comp that keeps popping into my head, and this is the laziest possible comp for him, but is Devin Smith. And it's like, okay, well, am I saying that because their games remind me of each other, or because they play the same position at the same high school? Like, with the same number. Like, why does he remind me of Devin Smith? Well, there's probably a lot of different reasons, but I think any of those 3 guys have the possibility of being a first-round NFL pick at some point down the line, depending on how their careers go. And if you can be a first-round pick, you can be a first-round pick after 3 years. So Egbuka probably has the most catches this year, just as a function of the depth chart more than anything else. And I think he probably has the most catches in any individual year. So I know I said this was a complicated question earlier, but I think maybe this is actually a relatively simple question.
Well, and your answer is Egbuka?
Yes, that's my answer. If I give you Egbuka or the field, what are you taking?
I'm still probably going to go Egbuka. I'm looking at Devin Smith. I think he finished with 121 catches. That was over 4 years. And you just estimated Egbuka at 120. So I mean, this seems like a very easy decision then. And then so I'm looking at what Michael Thomas did. He had 3 as a freshman, then redshirted, and then 54. So that's 57, and then 56. So he had like 113 receptions in his career, and that was basically over 2 seasons. But he was the X. But it's like the main target. Can that guy do in 2 years what somebody else is going to do over the course of 3 or 4? And if you're playing the H, I think you've got a really good chance. So, in continuing this discussion of Emeka Egbuka, freshman at Ohio State over the last 3 years, true freshmen who caught passes, ended up averaging 2 touchdowns per receiver. So if you caught a pass, that's why I don't have G. Scott on this list. You finish with two touchdown catches. Now, that's helped greatly by Garrett Wilson having 5, Chris Olave having, 3, Jackson Smith and Jigba only had 1. I don't think Julian Fleming had any. So, true freshman receivers averaging 2 touchdowns per season. I have Emeka Egbuka at 2.5 this year, Tom. How do you feel about that? Where are you going? Because I think maybe 2 feels like a good number. So 2.5, where are you?
I'm going over.
Ooh.
Because I think, this I think traces a little bit back to the conversation we had about the quarterbacks earlier, where you might be throwing more in the second halves of these games where, normally you'd think, okay, they're just going to try and run the clock out, keep things moving, take your 30-point win over whoever, whichever crappy Big Ten West team you're playing and get out of there. I think you're more likely to see more throwing this year with the backup for exactly the reasons I listed earlier. Like these guys need game reps. That's something that when we talked to Ryan Day last week, he said like the biggest thing is these guys need game reps, and you can't, they're working very hard to simulate the game reps, but nothing replaces game reps. So they're going to want to give these guys game reps in the second halves, even if it's, even if they're up by 30, 40 points, they're going to want to give these guys game reps, and they don't just want them handing off. You want these guys having to read a defense, have to, make, if it's an RPO, you make the RPO read. All this stuff. Like, I think you're running more of your offense with these guys later in the game than you would be normally with a more experienced backup. So you're probably going to see more throwing. If Egbuka's the H, you run a bunch of those drags, that kind of stuff. That's an easy read for a younger quarterback. I think I'm going to go over there just because I think you get one against Akron, you get one against Maryland, and you get one against someone, Tulsa or someone else, and you get you don't, and maybe you get one in the Big Ten championship game. Like as you kind of develop it during the course of the year, you get a cheapie or 2 in the beginning of the year, and then you start working your way into the rotation later in the year, and then all of a sudden you get another one. Jackson Smith and Jigba had one in the opening game of the season last year with that incredible catch against Nebraska. I think you said that was his only touchdown last year. Mm-hmm. Yep. He almost had one in the national championship game. Like you can get yourself back into that rotation later in the year. So he had one, 1.75 if because it was a touchdown for a while and then they took it away. But they had highlights of it. I saw a highlight reel of his freshman year, and he's like celebrating with Chris Olave in the national championship game. I was like, what is it? Oh, it was the touchdown that didn't count. Okay. But yeah, you can, you get a couple, you get one early, you get one middle of the year, you get one late as you sort of, work your way into the rotation, and it's a little bit more legitimate. Like, I think I could talk myself into being over that, but you're a hater. You don't think he's going to be any good. Is that what I'm hearing?
I just think if you're from Washington, you're out West. Are you really that good at football? That's.
Let's ask Napoleon Kaufman, sir.
But yeah, no, I won't be surprised if he goes over. But if he's the 7th wide receiver in a 6-man rotation, Tom, I think you're asking a lot, and you're setting this poor kid up for failure. So I hope you are happy with what you are doing. And I may be a hater, but you are a destroyer. So, sir.
Speaking of setting people up for unrealistic expectations,
yes.
What's the next one for over/under on sacks for Jack Sawyer? And how many sacks did Nick Bosa and Chase Young have as true freshmen?
Well, and here we go. Zach Harrison, 3.5 sacks as a true freshman. Mm-hmm. Chase Young, 3.5 sacks as a true freshman. Nick Bosa, 5 sacks as a true freshman. That's an average of 4. So, Tom, over/under on sacks for Jack Sawyer is 4.5 because he's rated higher than those guys were, although he may have dropped now with rivals because those stinking rivals people hate Ohio State Buckeyes, and everybody knows it. But 4.5 because, again, I'm saying this is a 15-game schedule. I know you're stuck at 13. But 4.5, I'm actually I'm going under because it's hard for me to expect more than what Chase Young did, and almost equal of what Nick Bosa did in terms of sacks. So I think 3.5, 4 is about perfect. And again, to me, he might be, I don't know that he's in the top 4 just yet, and I don't know if he will get there. So that will also make things a little bit more difficult. Although, if he's playing in the fourth quarter of games where the game is out of hand, but the opponent is just throwing the ball trying to catch up, now you've got an opportunity for a couple of cheapies where he could have a couple of games where he's got 2 in the fourth quarter of each game. Now he's already at 4 in just 2 games.
Yeah, I mean, 2 against Akron. I keep using Akron, but I mean, have you watched Akron football the last few years? Like,
nobody has.
I let me tell you, I've watched a little bit, and they're generally not super competitive games when they're playing Ohio University, let alone Ohio State. So, yeah, I think there's a real possibility you get one there. You get one, it's generally not 3 sacks in a game. Like, it's just, you're not getting that many reps as a true freshman. And this is a deep enough rotation that I don't know, unless you get guys hurt, I don't know how quickly you're really getting on the field. And you also have with Jack Sawyer the same thing we had with TreVeyon Henderson, which is didn't play his senior year of high school. So now hasn't played, he will have gone, he'll play this spring, but he will have functionally gone almost 2 years by the time playing an actual football game by the time he gets on the field this fall. So I'm sure he's in good shape. The work ethic there is never a concern. Same thing for Henderson, but you've got the adjustment to college game speed. You've got the adjustment to just playing in a game at all. I mean, this is the same thing with the quarterbacks. Like, practice is great. A game is a game. A game is different. There's no way to really simulate that in practice quite as well as you'd like to. So I'm going to go under here. I think 3. I would go over 3.5. I'd really have to think about 4.5 is, if he's over 4.5, it's just automatically like just write his name in Sharpie in the top 5 of the 2024 NFL draft. I mean, that's a real easy one. I think that's a lot to ask of someone who didn't play football last year. No. I think you can have a 3.5 sack, even a 4 sack season this year. That's an incredible year as a true freshman. It puts you in the class of those Zach Harrison, Chase Youngs. Like, that is elite company, and you're still going under here. So yeah, I think under is the responsible answer here.
Now, he did opt out of the high school season, but it was so that he could just train for college. So
right.
I know you don't think he cares about college time, but he does care about college, and he does care about playing this year. I know you don't. He's just sitting around playing his Nintendo or whatever, but he's not. He's doing more than that, I can assure you. The last one, Tom, is one of my favorites because it's about Jensen Dunn, who is one of my favorites in this class. Yes or no, Tom? Will he end up with more career interceptions than the guy that he draws many a comparison to? And that's Malik Hooker, Ohio State's greatest all-time safety, All-American. And I just do that greatest all-time safety in there because just looking for a reaction. He's not a 3-time All-American like Mike Doss. But will Jensen Dunn end up with more career interceptions than Malik Hooker? Malik Hooker, 7 career interceptions, all of which, of course, came in that amazing 2016 season. Tom, where are you? The answer is yes, by the way.
I was pausing there to see if Jack Tatum was going to fly out of the corner of your screen and just spear you. How dare you, sir? Yeah, 7's a lot. And I just went back and looked. 2019, the leading interceptor had 3. 2018, the leading interceptor had 3. 2017, it was Damon Webb. He had 5, and then Hooker in 16. It's just, that's a lot. That you're asking someone to be, you could be the leading interceptor the last couple of years, have 3 each year, and you're still not at 7. You have multiple years of 3. And, more career interceptions than Malik Hooker. If you have 3 interceptions a couple of years in a row and you get a cheapie this year, let's do it to Akron again. At this rate, Ohio State's going to beat Akron by 700 points. But yes, they have. Jensen Dunn has his interception. Jack Sawyer has his 4 sacks. Emeka Egbuka scores 3 second half touchdowns. Yeah, I mean, everyone's going to hit their over just in that one game. That's I think my big takeaway so far. Yeah, Evan Pryor goes for 199.5 yards. Yeah, for sure. This is one of these things where there's a lot of ways he doesn't hit that number, and you go back to Josh Proctor. Listen to us talk about Josh Proctor coming out of spring ball in 2019. I mean, Josh Proctor was making plays. Josh Proctor's the guy that we kept hearing from everyone, like, oh man, you wait till you see this kid. Wait till how many interceptions did Josh Proctor have the last couple of years? 3?
Yeah, not many.
Something like that. There's a lot of ways to not get to 7. Getting to 7 is pretty darn hard. I don't have the Ohio State record book up in front of me, but
keep talking. I'm bringing it up.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think through like how many guys have had 7 interceptions in their career, or more than 7, since the question was more career interceptions than Malik Hooker. So, I'm going to guess there have been 7 guys in Ohio State history who have had 8 or more interceptions in their career. So, yeah, I think that's probably an unrealistic expectation because, you have an injury, you just aren't the starting safety, you get stuck behind someone on the depth chart for a year. There's a lot of ways to not get to 8. Getting to 8 is probably very, very difficult. Have I vamped enough?
No, but I can go while I search it. Because to me, like, I immediately think yes, because 7 just seems like not very much, and it's a relatively small number over the course of 4 years. But if you are kind of like the best at something, or you are this great playmaker, you're not going to be there for 4 years. Then you're like, well, now he's going to do it in 3. But kind of like the Egbuka or the other guys, like, you may not be playing much that first year. So now you've got to do it in 3 years or in 2 years. And now that becomes quite a bit more difficult. But it's such a small number, man. It's only 7. I mean, I'm looking here. Okay.
I guess I was low. There've been like 12 guys who've done 7 in a season or more. But a lot of them there's a lot of 1970s in there and 1960s in there. I mean,
when throwing the ball wasn't really, it was,
right.
2-hand chest pass, basically.
Yeah. I mean, just looking at the guys, the interceptions career list cuts off with the top 12, and they have to have 12 to make that list. But it looks like
nobody from the 2000s.
Nobody from the 2000s. Damon Moore is the most recent guy to be on that list. And in the interceptions in a season, 7 is the number to get you there. And
2 this century.
Yeah, 2. Derek Ross and Malik Hooker. It's just that's a lot. I mean, it was a lot easier. You have guys go back to, like, there was a Florida quarterback who had at one point 9 interceptions that he threw in a game. Like, I mean, in like the early 1970s, like, you had a lot more of that because it was a lot more run-based offenses, and when you had to throw, you really had to throw, and the quarterbacks were terrible. I mean, they had how many interceptions did Rex Kern throw in 1969 against Michigan? 5, something like that. I mean, like, you had a lot more of those games back then than you do now.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Art Schleister threw 21 interceptions in 1978. Greg Fry 16. Heck, even Todd Beckman threw 14 in 2007. But Tom, I already said I was going over. So I'm going to stick with that, because if somebody, jot this down, 4 years from now, come back at me with this, and I will apologize if I'm wrong. Or, like I always do when I get something wrong, blame the player. Because it won't be my fault if he fails.
At them on Twitter. You have disappointed me and failed me
For the last time. So that's all of them, Tom. I think we did a pretty good job. I don't know if we were right on any of them. The ones where we disagreed, somebody was right.
Unless it's a push.
Unless it's a push, which it probably will be. Yes, Egbuka will end up with 2.5 touchdowns this year. So that will be crazy. Anything you want to add before we get out of here?
I don't think so. I think we're good for today. We have another busy week on the Morning Scoop. Had Matt Goldman on the Morning Scoop on Tuesday morning. Talk Ohio State basketball. The surprise bonus Ohio State Penn State game coming up on Wednesday night. It's like Ohio State was all excited to finally have a week to get healthy. It's like, nope, you get some Penn State instead. So that'll play that game on Wednesday. Had a fun conversation with Matt about just how good this team could be, because they've already done something that no Ohio State team has ever done in history, which is beat 3 top 15 teams in true road games consecutively in the same season. So that's a pretty good sign that, like, okay, this is at least a Sweet 16 team if you're consistently beating top 15 teams on the road. So what's the ceiling? Is this a team that could make the Final Four? Is this a team that could challenge for the national championship? Because you got that, and you've got a bunch of guys who are coming back. You got C.J. Walker starting to come back from injury. Jimmy Soto's supposed to be back relatively soon. Seth Towns is getting a little more healthy. So fun conversation about Ohio State basketball and exactly how many weekends you should potentially block off for March Madness, just in case there's Ohio State basketball still to watch. And then Wednesday, I'm having on Nick Walker, who just spent the weekend down in Florida to talk a whole bunch of 7-on-7 football. He saw a bunch of Ohio State commits, Ohio State recruits, some of the top players in the nation doing 7-on-7. We get to watch a little 7-on-7 when we were down in Florida for the national championship games. That was fun. We were just watching a kind of a practice and a tryout. So this is a lot more intense. And so we'll talk to Mick all about all the guys he saw, some names that you will know, and names that you will want to know in the next couple of years.
Yeah, the names you want to know, just following Mick on Twitter at Mick D. Walker. Photos from his time there this weekend of guys who I've never heard of, but we need to start paying attention to, apparently. And so he's got all of that covered. Give him a follow, and just get a head start on the guys that you're going to want to know about down the road. And I think that should do it. Tom, there is a bunch of smoke, of course. We should probably mention before we go, Elias Ricks, the LSU quarterback, may or may not enter the transfer portal, may or may not. If he does enter the transfer portal, look at Ohio State. He was the top corner in the 2020 class, if I'm not 2019, 2020 class, one of them. And so there's a lot of smoke out there that Ohio State is involved, or they are, he's looking at Ohio State. So that is the most popular topic of conversation on the Ask the Insiders board right now. Tons of posts there. Alex had something. Bill Green just had something today. More insight there. So if you are not yet a member and you're interested in stuff like that, that's where you can hear about it first and talk about it and obsess about it and read about it, talk about it, obsess about it. That's basically the 4 food groups right there for you if you are an Ohio State fan. So check it out, BuckeyeScoop.com. And Tom, I guess we will talk to everybody on Thursday.
Sounds about right. I'm sure there will be a whole bunch more interesting stuff to talk about then. And as Tony said, if you were interested in talking about it before then, BuckeyeScoop.com. I have said this to people on Twitter before, and it's like, if you are the type of fan who just like is a during the season fan, like, that's cool, that's fine. If you were the type of person who is interested in Ohio State football year round and follows recruiting and that kind of stuff, like, you would really probably benefit from being a member of BuckeyeScoop.com. Like, I keep retweeting people who are like, all right, you got me. I joined. This is incredible. This is so worth it. I can't believe I waited so long to join. Give it a shot now. We're heading into a very, very interesting month or so between the transfer portal and National Signing Day. There's a couple top 50 guys who Ohio State might be adding to their class. Guys who might impact Jack Sawyer's sack total. Guys who might impact Reid Carrico's time. There's a bunch of stuff to keep an eye on. Stuff that could change our answers on some of these over-unders we've been talking about. So if you were interested in any of that, BuckeyeScoop.com, give it a shot. And we're pretty sure you're going to like it because everyone else seems to.
Pretty sure. Well said, Tom. So that will do it for today, and we will talk to you guys later in the week.